G'day there guys, my name is Andrew. You probably know me, but I'm the designer from Kailash blades. I also help out with processes and, you know, equipment upgrades and that kind of thing. Anyway, we got an announcement today which we don't really have any photos to go with or any videos to go with. So I've borrowed a GoPro off a mate and figured might as well do a bit of a vloggy, walk aroundy type situation. So the big announcement today is that Kailash is swapping to ADCR V2. Now, the first question is, who's gonna get it? Now, if you place an order before the price rise, you're gonna get 5160. And if you place an order after the price rise, you're gonna get ADCR V2. Now, if you want to pay to get your old order swapped over to ADCR V2, we can organize that. If you're not sure if your order is before or after price rise, we can organize that. Basically, just let me know, send us an email, and we can sort it out together. So, the real question maybe is why? Right, we've been using 5160 for a long time. It's been absolutely adequate. So why swap now? So let's talk about what's good about 5160. So 5160 is firstly locally available. Now this might sound like a bit of a non-thing, but in Nepal it's really hard to import stuff. Firstly, it's really expensive. Secondly, you can't depend on it. Sometimes the border's shut. Sometimes India doesn't let stuff in. Sometimes China doesn't let stuff in. Sometimes it just waits in customs for months and then, you know, all your production capabilities get thrown out. So it's good to have stuff in the country ready to go. The other thing is, because it's in the country, that's a lot cheaper. You don't have to ship it. It's got a lower carbon footprint. It's recycled and it's cheap. These are awesome things about 5160. It's a really solid steel that, especially for large chopping blades, is absolutely up to scratch. But it's not without its issues, and this is not so much 5160 in general, but just the fact that we are working with salvaged leaf springs. So the first thing is the composition. So we are getting dialed enough with our geometry and our heat treat that we can kind of pick up if the composition is off a little bit. Now, it's not ever off by a lot, right? If you're using a leaf spring, it's made out of leaf spring. But what that is differs a little bit from maker to maker. It's not something that is necessarily ever going to be able to be picked up by the customer. But if you do the testing like we have, maybe you can see a little bit of higher carbon here or lower carbon here, and when you're really trying to get your geometry dialed in, it holds you back from being able to push things a little bit further. The next thing is voids. Now, voids are like a big scary thing. The notion that your knife might have a hole in it somewhere. But in our experience, if a piece of steel has a void in it, we are gonna find it during forging and grinding. So, you know, we're hammering this blade down and it can sink in, or we can grind and it'll show up as a crack or a divot or whatever. You know, if you think about it, these springs steel start in 12 mil thick, and then for something like a mutiny down near the edge, you know, it's gonna be like 2 mil thick. So if it's got any like real thickness to it at all, you know, we're going to be able to find it during the grinding stage. And since we have been in operation, we've probably only ever, I don't know, shipped like 2 blades out to customers that we've noted have a void in them, and both of these were at the Ricasso, where it's pretty thick. Obviously coverable by warranty. And yeah, we're not super worried about this from like a warranty perspective. It's more workshop flow, right? Just, we put all this effort into these knives. Smiths have swung hammers for hours and ground, and sometimes these things get picked up so late, like in the final finishing. And that is just a massive waste of time. It's really annoying to the smiths. And you know, it'll help our workshop run more smoothly if we have steel that we can rely on to be a bit cleaner. So we made a decision a while ago, walking across the tram lines here in Royal Park. Yeah, we made a decision a while ago to move to some kind of blade steel. And here comes a tram now. There we go. Yeah, we made a decision to go to some kind of blade steel, and we were like, is it going to be 5160? Are we going to go to 52100? What are we going to do? Because we could just get clean 5160 that is, you know, compositionally accurate and dependable, and work with that. But we ran into some issues with this, trying to source it locally. Trying to get this stuff from China is hard. Trying to get this stuff from India is hard. Not particularly trustworthy vendors in a lot of instances. And so we thought, okay, well, let's look abroad. And we've managed to track down and get a pretty sizable supply of ADCR V2 shipped in from Austria. Now, we moved to ADCR V2 for a few reasons. One is that it has a pretty forgiving forge heat treat. So it's got vanadium in it, which basically stops it from overheating as much. The grains don't get as large if it gets exposed to a little bit too high a temperature during heat treat, which is another good thing for consistency, because, you know, we do want to keep things as traditional as possible in terms of the actual processes that are occurring. And we don't really want to move away from all of our traditional forge setups. It's also got a higher potential hardness. Now, in our experience, if our knives get damaged, it's because the apex is rolling. We're not having a lot of chipping. It's not particularly common. And this suggests that we could push a little bit higher. You know, we would say that maybe the toughness that we have from 5160 in a chopping application, which is, you know, the main durability and performance aspect that we're worried about for these blades, is, you know, it's tougher than we need, and we could probably trade it for a little bit of extra hardness to get a better balance. And the final thing is wear resistance. So this comes with hardness, but it also comes with some of the alloying elements that are in there in ADCR V2, which is that we don't just make chopping blades. We also make, you know, smaller knives, we make fixed blades, we make all sorts of things. And for these knives, it would be helpful for us to have a steel which is a little bit harder and has a little bit more wear resistance. ADCR V2 does that. So probably next question you got in mind is, but isn't 5160 better at some things? Like, yeah, it's tougher. But in our experience, we're not running into a lack of toughness as a failure mode. Like, I've already talked about edges, but I think a big part of why 5160 has a reputation for being super beatable is the durability of the body of the blade itself, like the spine. And if you're full quenching a blade, then that makes sense. You know, like, you don't want a super hard spine. You want to be able to pry with it and baton with it and do all this kind of stuff. And 5160 is better for that. But for us, our spines are basically completely unhardened. So the toughness of unhardened ADCR V2 is insanely high. And it's basically the same as unhardened 5160. So for the overall strength of the entire blade as a kind of unit, we can afford to go to ADCR V2 without losing any like overall beatability. Why aren't we doing it as an option? You know, we love options. We've got heaps and heaps of options. Some would say too many. So why don't we just have 5160 as an option, ADCR-V2 as an upgrade? Reason is that it would be really disruptive to the workshop. So these steels have different heat treat processes the whole way through. We're normalizing differently, we're quenching differently, we're tempering differently. And if we have a mixture of steels going through the workshop, this is going to cause a lot of problems. Maybe we'd have to end up doing like batch production, and then we'd have to ensure that there is like an even mix of 5160 and ADCR-V2. You know, for regular makers that are doing like, you know, 200 blades of stock pieces and then shipping them out, having multiple blades is not really an issue. Sorry, the helicopter's coming, so I'm gonna run this way. Yeah, we're gonna give this helicopter a little while and we'll start again. Here's the air ambulance, bringing people in from the bush, taking them to the children's hospital. Okay, so the helicopter has died down now. We're still in Royal Park. I'm walking through the grasslands bit in the middle. Yeah, why not do as an option? So if you're doing, you know, 200 blades, they're all getting forged in one big batch, and then you store them as stock blades and you ship them out to customers. This is, you know, not an issue, but for us, we're doing everything to order. There's needing to ensure that enough ADCR-V2 blades get ordered so that our batches are reliable, or enough 5160 so it's reliable. And it's just going to be so challenging for us to navigate having two different steels coming through the workshop. And really, as we've said already, we don't really think that there are enough specific advantages to 5160 on a performance and functional level to justify keeping it in the workshop. Like ADCR-V2, at least as we currently see it, is basically just a step up across the board. And we're pretty happy to just make the move and swap over to it completely. With this said, you know, as I said previously, sometimes India doesn't let stuff in, sometimes China doesn't let stuff in. You know, we're in a pretty tricky place in terms of geopolitical tensions, right? So maybe, you know, at some point in future, we lose the ability to bring it into the country. In which case, 5160 is always there as a backup. We can readjust our prices and we can, you know, go back to shipping a steel, which has done us very well for quite a while and has a pretty great reputation. So, you know, happy to give it a crack. So that's basically it. I'll summarize again. All blades are going to be ADCR-V2 going forwards, starting from like 2nd of June. You know, any orders that were placed around then, price rise. And yeah, we're pretty excited. We've been working really hard on this. It has been very hard to get this steel in. It has been really challenging to get the heat treat worked out and get it brought into the workshop. But we think we've found a really great balance between, you know, improved performance and being able to keep traditional processes, which is great. And yeah, that's it for this video. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a couple more of these walking around direct to camera things for announcements that don't quite have, you know, some nice photo to go with. So let me know if there's some other bits of Melbourne you would like to see me walk around. You know, there's cool little suburbs and little back streets. Yeah, let me know in the comments. Anyway, here's Melbourne CBD. There's the skyline. That's Melbourne Uni over there. And this is the hospital, and you can see the helicopter, which really wanted to be a part of this video over there too. Anyway, hope you're having a great day. Let us know how you feel about it in the comments, and see you around.